Philip Fawkes won the South Waterside ward last night for UKIP, defeating the Tory incumbents with a majority of 315. Morning, Philip.
Good morning.
Are UKIP here to stay?
I think they quite possibly are here to stay, yes. Obviously there's an element of a protest vote, but certainly what I was getting on the doorstep was that people are looking to us to address the issues particularly of Europe and mass immigration.
Mohammed Ansar from Southampton, political and social commentator. Morning, Mohammed.
Morning, Steve.
Are UKIP here to stay?
I don't think so. I think we do have to take the threat and the swing towards UKIP fairly seriously, but I think once the public consciousness away from the right and the far right subsides and we see less xenophobia, we see less worry about mass immigration, and we see a concentration on the facts, I think people will move back towards the mainstream parties.
Philip, talk to me about this. People think about UKIP and they think about the EU, they think about your immigration policies. What will you be able to do locally?
I fail to see anything right-wing in wanting to have one's destiny in one's own hands. I just fail to see how that is right-wing. And I also tired of hearing people complaining about the schools, overcrowding in the schools, congestion on the roads, our housing development, our National Health Service. I mean, somebody's got to add 2 and 2 and make 4.
Mohammed, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, Philip, who I understand is a distant relation of Guy Fawkes, who
that's nothing to be proud of, Mohammed.
No. Well, I don't think he lasted too long either with his fans. But you say that you don't think that UKIP is particularly right wing, but you're tied with a number of European far right parties through the Europe of freedom and democracy group. So you are sister parties with people like Geert Wilders' Freedom Party and some of the far right groups in Finland and the Nordic countries, and also Marine Le Pen with the Front National. So I think we have to explode a couple of myths. Which first is that the British or the English electorate in particular have voted for UKIP mainly as a protest vote, mainly on the back of the fact that Labour have given us, unfortunately, a number of failing policies, many of those around fiscal and economic reform. The Tories have come in, and sadly, we've seen the ugly face of Tory politics with swinging cuts, mass wealth shifts in corporation tax, moving from the poorest in society to the richest in society.
Okay, Mohammed, what about the argument that the reason that UKIP are doing so well is because those 3 main parties have all failed in their time in power to have an open and honest discussion about issues like immigration?
I don't think, look, what we saw in Eastleigh, in Eastleigh something like about 27% of the vote in Eastleigh now go towards UKIP. Now, there's no mass immigration problem in Eastleigh. There is no real issue around xenophobia. Eastleigh is a 96% white, English-speaking area. We've got reasonable levels of employment. The local authorities have been doing very well recently. However, Diane James and Eastleigh and UKIP nationally are really stoking fears around immigration and around foreigners. We hear about this mass immigration coming from Bulgaria and Romania, and it's a complete fallacy.
Philip, it's the economy, stupid, isn't it? And Labour were unelectable in the 80s because they weren't able to prove that they could deal with our economy. That the issue that UKIP will have come a general election is that people worry most about the pound in their pocket, and you haven't proven yet that you can address their economic worries.
Oh, I think we're certainly a work in progress. I wouldn't deny that. And it's very, very difficult to project forward any of our sort of economic plans, as indeed Labour are having the same difficulty, and the other major parties. I don't think please understand that the UKIP party are not looking for repatriation or anything of that sort. We're looking for controlled immigration, and I cannot see anything wrong with that. You have an infrastructure. If you haven't got an infrastructure that can cope with numbers coming into this country, then surely it has to be addressed.
Look, Philip, I have to say that, if you don't mind me coming in, Steve, look, that's completely absurd. Firstly, the IPPR issued a report a couple of years ago which said immigrants...
The IPPR, Mohammed, you'll have to explain that for us.
The Institute of Public Policy, they wrote a report a couple of years ago which gave very, very clear indications saying that immigrants coming to the UK add between £1 and £2.5 billion a year to the Treasury, to the Exchequer. Now, we have an ageing society. About more than half of our welfare bill goes on looking after pensioners. We have a real problem here as more and more of the United Kingdom begins to look like, the coastline in Bournemouth and Poole, and we see an ageing population. We're going to need to look after them. Now, playing on fears of immigration, if anything, we need immigrants. We need healthy immigration into this country. So playing on those kind of fears is completely...
We're not arguing. We're not arguing about that, but it must be our decision at the rate of immigration, not a decision made by a bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels.
Look, any party who says we are not going to ascribe to forced repatriation tells you something about where they stand in politics.
Well, no, wait a minute. You mentioned the BNP. You mentioned the BNP. It was your words, not mine. And all I'm telling you is that you couldn't get anything further apart than the BNP and Farage and UKIP or me. Well,
I'm not sure that's quite true, because Nigel Farage mentioned this week, and we had an article in The Guardian which said very clearly, you have no checks and balances over the people who are standing for elections. And if you get somewhere in the region of 70 to 100 seats, which looks very, very likely, because just from the overnight count, we've had some in the region of, some are saying 43, some are saying 46, but you could easily get 100 seats. And if that's the case, we know, and I have to agree with Ken Clarke, we are going to be getting Fruit Loops, crazies and racists getting seats, and there's absolutely no vetting process in place to check.
Mohammed, can I just test your mathematics? If you've got, I think it's 5 who have been evidence of belonging to the BNP, what's 5, what does that represent in percentage terms from the number of candidates of 1,700?
We have had allegations all week talking about members who have been
Of course we have. It's been a smear campaign by the Conservative Party.
Philip, look, UKIP is replete with the far right. It has now become the muster point for ex-members of the BNP, EDL sympathisers, and people who essentially are looking for a venting point where they can discuss issues of immigration.
Well, let me ask this then. If that's the case, Mohammed, this is a democracy where people vote for the government and the control that they get. And that being said, UKIP are getting the public backing to a degree we've not seen before in these local elections. So they are clearly stimulating some interest that has not been stimulated by other politicians.
Steve, I'll come back on that. And look, I think you're right. There's no denying that.
Well, what you're saying is
this is clearly the most sensational, and UKIP will like this, but this is clearly the most sensational result possibly we've ever seen in local elections in England. And it is a very worrying sign of how far right the centre has shifted. But it's a move that's been mirrored across Europe.
Okay, Philip.
I mean, what he's saying is that 24% of the electorate are potential BNP defectors. I mean, that's what you're saying. And I think that's what the electorate...
That's not been said. Whether you look in Germany or Greece or throughout continental Europe, there's been a significant shift to the right from between 20 and 30% of the electorate, and we're not seeing anything different.
Mohammed, I think what you want, I respect your views, you want a federal state of Europe. That's what you want. A United States of Europe.
I haven't made any mention of European politics. But I'll say this. Look, I'll say this. Not that I'm a big fan of David Miliband because of his stance on Iraq and some of his other foreign policy machinations. However, he was absolutely correct when he gave his speech a couple of years ago when he said that the left needs to renew, and the left has currently failed the electorate, and we see that in these elections. We'll
leave it there for now, guys. Thanks very much for joining us. Mohammed Ansar from Southampton, political and social commentator. Also Philip Fawkes from Lyndhurst, who is the new UKIP councillor for New Forest East. He won South Waterside. Are UKIP here to stay is our big conversation this morning.